Yeah, I think it was really cool for me too, how what we didn't record was our conversation after the last podcast.
Mm.
And I wish we would have recorded that because that would have
It
been
was
an
great.
epic podcast. And so we're, bringing some of that in today. Yeah, it's, I mean, the topic that we were excited about today is wholeness. And I think what we've already shared today about wholeness is interesting because, wow, several things I want to say right now. So one phrase we were talking about is we are whole, especially in vulnerability. And kind of talking about whether it's especially in vulnerability or even with vulnerability. And for me, I actually looked up, so I was speaking with my friend Kim yesterday, and vulnerability came up. And he's going to be on our podcast, I think, in 2 weeks.
Awesome.
And we were talking about, and I'm going to do it again right now. So vulnerability, we were like, he's like, well, we have to define it. And I was like, that's brilliant. Let's make sure we actually understand what the Webster's definition of vulnerability is. And if you look at it, it says, and so this was interesting, the quality or state of being exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed, either physically or emotionally. And I feel like I'm channeling my inner Brene Brown right now when I think of, if we go off that definition, then it's like, yeah, be mindful if I'm, don't know somebody and they have a weird energy and I feel threatened by them. I'm not going to be like, oh my gosh, I feel so gentle and emotional and fragile today. It's like, what I'm talking about is mindful awareness of how am I showing up? Am I hiding vulnerabilities because I think I need to be whole or to be what I think the world expects me to be or what I think I should be to feel enough? And the vulnerability to take those masks off and allow people to really see me, even if I may be harmed emotionally. That may happen sometimes, but I think, how do we define being harmed? If I'm doing it for some external stimulus that is, I think, manufactured, or I'm chasing, or I'm reaching for something, and I'm really putting so much weight on what someone thinks or says or does, then okay, I may allow myself to be harmed emotionally. But if I'm just being myself, whether I'm sad, I'm excited, I'm tired, I just want to show up, I just want to be here in the moment. I don't think with my practices, with how I've grown as a man, with who I believe I am, I don't think the risk for me being emotionally harmed is that great at all. I think, physical harm, that's a whole other conversation. I'm talking about emotional, vulnerability, and channeling my inner Brene Brown, I think, is where that is the requirement for real intimacy and connection and community and friendship and love with others. And so for me, vulnerability, like I'm whole, especially in my vulnerability, I feel more whole when I allow myself to be vulnerable and I let people see me, and then channeling my inner Marianne Williamson, give others permission to do the same if they maybe weren't already in that space. And to me, I think it's a paradox maybe, because I feel more whole when I am vulnerable.
Yeah.
And it's so damn nourishing. Because then it's like that inner voice of like, I'm going around putting on my masks for whatever reason. And then whether I do it first or someone else, it's like, oh, wait a minute. You mean you're actually showing up authentically and vulnerable? It's like your soul perks up or something, You know what I mean? Like my soul is just like, ooh, that's a frequency that feels good. And I lean into it. And that's one of my biggest lessons this year so far, is embracing that more and more than I ever have before in all areas of life. And I feel so much more whole for doing that. And I think others around me feel more whole too, from what I'm seeing
Mm-hmm.
and what I'm hearing. Uh, what do you think about that?
No, I love that. I think just building on that in from my perspective, I think showing up and as you step it back for a second here, kind of as you described vulnerability there and how we're trying to speak about it and use it. It's so connected with authenticity, and just with being present, being open, um, being consistent with who you feel like you are inside, and showing that, and not uh, not a mask or a whether that's more athletic or smarter or whatever thing it is you're trying to show other people, but just showing how you perceive and feel yourself, and showing up in that. I think it is one of the best ways and the most meaningful ways to it not only express our wholeness to others, um, or desire to live from that energy, but also it allows us to, I think, rest in that. It allows us to participate and be in that wholeness, and that's a very grounding. And I think this is one of the reasons that it affects the relationships, and you can actually start to, as you shift, you can see people around you, your community shift. Because I think just by that act of you choosing to show up in that way, it creates a space for someone else to show up that way, because there's an immediate lack of judgment that is so common in so many of our relationships. And I feel like we miss the fact that judgment often originates with us, because we're judging ourselves. We've judged ourselves as less or broken or not whole. And then we put on a mask to make it feel whole. Like, that's an act of judgment against yourself.
Oh, that's good.
And I think when we do that, it just like that energy is pervasive. Like, others feel that judgment. Maybe not judgment of them, but they can tell that there's something that's just a little bit off. Like, we're really, I think as humans, like, we're really in tune with this stuff a lot more than we realize. And once you do start creating space to be sensitive to that and think about that, you can really tell, like, individuals who you hang out around, that you just feel more open, feel more easy, feels lighter. You feel less likely to be judged for however it is you're showing up. And I think but I think it's really empowering to realize that that feeling we often put on others, that judgment very often starts with us, is where we feel it most. We're judging ourselves. And then stepping out in the world and surprised when others judge us, when we're leading by example. Like, we've already told other people energetically how we want to be treated, because that's what we're doing to ourselves. And I think that's we'll step into this too, but that's a neat part of the wholeness conversation, is like the becoming aware of your wholeness and choosing to treat yourself as whole. But I'm interested in talking about that moving forward too. But any thoughts on just that reflection?
Yeah, well, I actually have a question that just came up.
Yeah.
How would you define wholeness?
I think it's a great question. I think for me, what has made the most sense as an idea of not being broken, not lacking, not being deficient in something, in who I am. Like, I didn't, and that's really, I think, how I use it specifically, is not broken, not deficient in something. I don't need some external practice or some external thing to make me whole. That it is something that just is. And I think, yeah, that should be included, I think, in my definition as wholeness, is just, we just are. Like, it's accepting who we are in this moment. And so it's an idea of there's not something I need to do to become whole. There's not this practice or activity I need to do every day for a certain amount of time to be whole, or hang out with this person or that person to be whole. It's just a it's a state of existence that already is. And I think that can take some different shapes just depending on um, how somebody sees themselves, how somebody spiritually sees the makeup of the world or their world. I think the exact definition of like what that wholeness is for those could be different. Um,
Yeah.
but the main tenet being that you already are, that we were either came that way or created that way or happened that way, whatever, but that wholeness existed from the moment I existed.
Okay, so I have another follow-up question on that.
Yeah.
What does wholeness feel like to you?
I think that's really cool question. An interesting one that I don't think I would have been able to answer 15 years ago. I think that answer for me didn't really start to form except for the last decade, and that was really uh, once I felt something different than broken, and I think that was my initial pervasive feeling was of just being maybe not even broken, maybe too strong, but just lacking. Like there was something in my life that was missing. Like I was not a complete person, whether that was around what I believed or what I did, but there was something outside of me that needed to happen or I needed to interact with to be complete, to be enough. So it was, I think, initially connected with those ideas of enoughness and being worthy. And it was a really neat journey for me of stepping into accepting exactly who I was right then and claiming that as whole. And so to answer your question more clearly, I think the feeling is it's really been one of a pervasive peace, of a calmness, of looking things that benefit my life, but not trying to fix my life. I'm not.
Like I'm okay right now, but that would also be nice.
Exactly.
Right?
And I think that's it's learning to carry. It feels often, I think, like a duality, especially in our culture, because we are so programmed that only one thing can be on top. Like we can only be driven toward one thing. There can only be one winner. We define ourselves often by what we do. A very select category. And I think the reality that I've started to live in is that I am whole and I love who I am right now. I would also like to be more disciplined. I would like to be, work out more often. I do. I would like to give others more space when they talk and less often be creating my response while they're still talking and actually hear them. I mean, there are things in my life that I would like to shift, and I'm actively working on shifting, and I'm still whole.
Yeah. All right. I feel like I'm almost interviewing at this point because it's such a good topic.
I guess I was going to ask you your definition.
I know. Well, I do, but I have one more follow-up question. I think
Here we go.
This is so good. But I did. I was like, I kind of feel like I'm interviewing you, but that's not what our intention was. But whatever.
Here we are.
Is okay. So, like, if I was listening to this, I was like, okay, like this is interesting. What I think I'd want to know is what. Okay, so like you define wholeness, what it feels like. You said you felt the pervasive brokenness. We both talked about that. I have empathy for that for sure in my life. What do you think shifted you to living more in wholeness? Because I think that's one of the biggest things that most of us are. It's such a like in my heartbreak with my ex, I was talking to you about wholeness, and there was so many moments where I didn't feel whole because the grief was overwhelming, and we talked about that a lot. So I'm curious, for you, what did something happen? Was it an epiphany? Like what happened that shifted you into like, wow, now I'm living more in wholeness, like the majority of the time, or whatever that is.
Yeah, great question. I think there were a few things. I think one of them started being just a practice of when I did define and understood mentally that I saw myself as not being whole, that I identified as missing something or not being enough, that was something I wanted to shift. So I think initially, like, there was a desire and awareness of it not being that way, and the desire to believe that I was whole and to act on that. And then from that, I think it became a daily practice of journaling and meditation, and just being sensitive to that. And I would literally like ask myself, like, am I not whole? Why? And I would list things down. And then,
Okay, that's cool.
and that was really interesting too, because it really helped me start to see my thought patterns around my broken, or what I would have called my brokenness or emptiness. And I think it made it much more tangible, physical. Like, I could actually see the thoughts. And over time, I started to realize, like, how much I was creating that, how much I was setting up those barriers of things I was not. Back to that earlier comment of, like, I started to realize how much that was a self judgment of, I'm not whole. I was like claiming that. And then it became a practice of, like, shifting that and stating that I was whole, and I would see how long I could feel that in a day. And I think that was really interesting too, and just choosing to believe that, to practice it. And initially, it was, and this may sound silly unless you been in this process before, of changing how you think and changing your mental framework around your identity or something like that. But, like, I would feel whole for a few minutes before I'd have a thought about, like, no, you're not. Like, you're still screwing this up. You're still missing on that. Like, you lied to your girlfriend, like, whatever it was. And that would, knock me off of that. And then it was just a process of coming back to it and choosing that wholeness. And then I saw something else really neat shift. Once it became something that I actually felt like I was owning, and showing I would wake up and feel whole, I started to realize that all these other feelings can still exist. I can still feel like I did something wrong. I can still feel like there's stuff I need to work on, but it didn't detract from my understanding of my wholeness anymore. It was just like, oh, that's a way that I can add or improve or elevate or empower myself. But because I did it that way doesn't mean that I'm not whole, doesn't mean that I'm broken. I still am whole. I'm just working on some stuff, sometimes more than others. Does that make sense?
Oh, dude, totally. Yeah. That's yeah, it sounds like it's like you're building a muscle. And I was talking about this kind of consciousness piece with somebody very dear to me, visited me this weekend and stayed with me. We had wonderful conversations, and we were talking about I don't think I've talked about this in the first 2 episodes, maybe a tiny bit, but not to this level. Is like, this is what it sounds like part of what you were doing, and I would think I'd add my own flavor to it here. Is you were so like the 7. I don't think I've talked about this in the first 2 episodes.
I don't know that I'm following what you're talking about.
Yeah, I talked about, like, owning my kingdom and stuff. And this has been, so credit to Michael Singer and Michael Brown, the author of The Presence Process and Untethered Soul. It was like, okay, like, I was living most of my life, and I think of it like I'm in a classroom and I can never leave the classroom. Even when I'm sleeping, I'm still in that damn classroom. It's like not a prison. It's a place I can never leave while I'm alive. And I'm just lost in these 7 different entities. And it is my smell, my taste, my touch, my sight, my hearing, my emotional feelings in my body, and my thoughts. And, like, those sucked most of the time. Add on the diagnosis that, I got, and it's just like the data from my mind, my heart, and my body's 5 senses just consistently were sucky. And then reading the books of Michael Singer and Michael Brown was like, wait a minute, I am none of those things. I am the eighth person who can be the teacher to the 7 hooligans in my classroom. Whoa, wait a minute. I can't leave the classroom, but I can make the most of it. And I'm actually the 8th teacher, which is me as a soul in my consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And like meditation, same thing, really helped me with that. My spiritual practices really helped me with that.
Yeah.
And I felt a lot of wholeness. Interestingly, for me, again, total vulnerability. I felt so much wholeness single in the last, 5, 6 years. That's been growing and growing and growing. When I get in relationship, interesting things arise. And that has been more of a challenge for me in my life, is maintaining my wholeness in relationship and like, what is going on here? Is it baggage? Is it habits? Is it limiting belief? Is it like programs? Like, why is this happening? And getting back to this year and the grief and our conversations on wholeness is like, I felt so whole in so many ways. I always have room to grow. I'm always learning. And wow, there's moments right now I feel so unwhole. And I felt like it was the 7 rushing back in. I lost control of the classroom. I lost that groundedness. And it's like, oh my gosh, I am the third one of, my emotions, and getting all mixed up in that. In grief, it's so messy and sticky. And it's like, what a good learning for relearning on a deeper level of wholeness. As even like for me, emotional heartbreak with a woman is like the most uncomfortable thing, aside from almost dying today due to choking. That was up there. And oh God. And so I think what I'm hearing you say, like that's how I'd put my flavor on it, my perspective of like, it's a muscle, I'm building it. A heartbreak can easily have the potential to throw me off, doesn't have to, but it definitely knocked me off the horse, a couple months ago. And like for you, it's like, yeah, I built the muscle and I realize I'm not any of that garbage, and I don't have to make it the enemy either. I can work with it and befriend it all and still know it is not me inherently, but it is a part of my experience. And the pain, this is actually one of my gratitudes before we started, the pain and the discomfort, not only are they not my enemies, but they are here to teach me something. And if I face that with courage and openness, I will grow and I will become better and add to my inherent awareness of wholeness. And so those are my initial thoughts on that piece. What do you think?
Well, I think it's really cool. I concur with that. It's a really neat process. Also, just seeing the influence of those great books. I mean, Presence Process and the Untethered Soul are both just incredible. And I think that I didn't really touch on that when you asked the question earlier. An immense amount of my desire to shift that frame around wholeness in my life was mentors in my life, books like those, and just a few individuals in my life that I perceived and realized as seeing themselves as whole, seeing themselves as complete and enough, and just the different way that they were able to interact with the world, the different way that experiences they handled different experiences. Just, I think there was a lot more flexibility with how they showed up. There was a lot more lightness. There was more joy, even when things were heavy. And there was just something about that really spoke to me. I was very desirous of stepping into that frame or understanding of the world. And so I think there was a lot of external encouragement and reflection that kind of happened along that journey and that path as well. And I think that that's really important to remember. This is so much growth happens privately and on an internal level, But so many of our lessons, so many of I think what helps guide and shape that is our community and the mentors we have, the what we allow ourselves to intake, the books we read, what we listen to, what we watch, and that's an encouraging thing about, one reason we're doing this and spending time with each other and developing a supportive community and extending that is just the awareness of how important it is, the frame around who we spend time with, what we do. Like it affects us so much, and not in a judgment way about feeling broken or empty either. But I was surrounded by people who also felt that, and so like it was just a.
Oh yeah.
I don't want to say I want to own my choices. I'm not saying it was a byproduct of what they thought, and that I still did have a choice. But we are absolutely affected by.
Oh, totally. We're like an
by who
organism.
we're around and the things we give access to our mind and our emotions.
Yeah.
So that's been really powerful and impactful. And I think one of the neat things with this lesson too is it's just so it's so counter to a lot of like how we were raised, and not trying to blame my parents or no judgment there, just that there's pervasive in my community, just kind of pervasive thoughts of not being enough, of being broken, of needing something outside of ourselves to fix that, or to satiate that. Obviously, the other alternative, as we spoke about already, was like wearing a mask and just faking it, which is so funny to me how much all of us have done that. So many people still do.
Yeah.
We're conscious of it. People don't want it, but we fall into it. It's so easy.
It's a trap. It's an easy
It
trap.
is. It's a huge trap.
Yeah.
And it's so. And I'm not saying I don't still fall into that. Last week, when we were doing our podcast, like started to show up as somebody that is not congruent.
Yes, I love how much you own that.
It's
awesome.
And it's, so it's not like it's not a fix. It's not like one time and like I'm not going to struggle anymore. It's just I think that's one reason we're excited about talking about this is the agency we have and the choice we have behind it, like recognizing our own wholeness and then choosing to step into that, choosing that wholeness over and over and over again. And I think it's been incredible how it has reshaped my life. Just the emotional and mental calmness and even flexibility and options I feel like I have now in life versus when I was trying to act like somebody who had it together, versus wearing those masks, just like that insecurity, that feeling that it was a lie, not trusting myself because I was judging myself with it, and then therefore like it just judging all my other relationships too. I think that's a powerful piece of the empowerment journey and leveling up, is not only how it changes our internal environment, is it really creates a different space for friendships and stuff too. Like when you stop expecting other people to show up as perfect, stop expecting or requiring other people to wear a certain thing or talk a certain way or act a certain way, like you just have so much more space for people to be human and to love them and to forgive them, and to let them navigate their journey and their own wholeness without your without your judgment or proclamations on that. And I think the neat thing about that is it allows you to experience so much more joy with other people, and because of that space it creates.
Dude, amen. I just thought of something else with what you were saying, is just how far we both have come. I don't want to, I'm not going to share your story, then that's yours to share. I think just what I do know about you and the struggles and certain things you were faced with, we both have connection and empathy and love and compassion and understanding for being faced with big challenges,
Hmm.
like with our physical health, our body, like, are we going to live? Like,
Yeah.
and I think it reminds me of, you've heard me talk about this a lot, is like, whether it's a trauma, a tragedy, an accident, a death, and coming back to life, a near death, a disease, a cancer, whatever it is, it's like one of the biggest commonalities, those things, of the people that like level up and just explode into growth and evolve like a butterfly if you choose to face it in a certain way. And so when I think about that and like how far we've come,
Hmm.
it makes me think of an interesting topic. So I think just, everything's dichotomies. And I think it's an interesting dichotomy you brought up. So I want to segue into this other piece of like, I'm whole now, and that doesn't mean I can't also do or attain these other things, but
Hmm.
I'm not chasing it in a stressful, anxious need to get it to then feel good, because it never works. You're just,
Yeah.
you're chasing something that never comes. And it's interesting too, in the rat race, for like people get out of the corporate rat race and then get in the spiritual evolution rat race, which I fell prey to, of like, all right, I'm not going to try to get tangible things to make me feel okay and whole. I'm going to keep chasing spiritual things to feel okay and whole. And that was another journey I went through.
Hmm.
And it's like, whoa, that's interesting. Same carrot I'm chasing, but just it looks different. It's just in a different realm. And so what I'm getting towards too on the topic is, when I think of David Goggins, when I think of Tony
Hmm.
Robbins, when I think of, I mean, Tom Bilyeu, I mean, there's so many names I could go off on, is this: the more I face discomfort, the more I face the discomfort of like a cold plunge,
Hmm.
the discomfort of vulnerability, the discomfort of being seen, the discomfort of discipline. The more I do that, I'm even thinking of, also Les Brown talks about this, Sadhguru talks about it, so many people, is the more I do that, it's like my soul comes to life more and more and more, and my wholeness organically expands and expands and expands. And I'm reminded of, Les Brown quoted this a lot when he was big: the wealthiest place in the world is the graveyard.
Hmm.
And that's where so many untapped into dreams and potential are just dead, with people lying there that were never made manifest. And so to me, it's an interesting dichotomy of, the more I face discomfort and fear and discipline and all these things and vulnerability, and like, I'm just like, I am a soul, I am here, let me see you, let's do this, let's live, the more whole I feel. Because the more I feel it's my soul expanding, engaging,
Hmm.
and like self-fulfilling the thing that was always there, just without fear. And I don't even have an official conclusion to this thought. I'm just running with it because it feels so good. It also reminds me of The Alchemist, and a quote one of my old mentors told me is, wherever you go, there you are. Is like, he was searching for something that was already where he started in the very beginning.
Love that.
And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't take the journey, though.
Right. Not at all.
And so I think maybe what I'm trying to say is, the more I live and face discomfort and grow into not letting fear or masks or programs or all that garbage prevent me from doing something or saying something, the more whole I ironically feel,
Hmm.
because it's like I feel alive.
Yeah.
And that aliveness, to me, like when I think of what does it feel like, or how would I define
Hmm.
wholeness? Wholeness to me is feeling present, alive, fully myself, and at peace in the present moment.
Hmm.
that right there, I'm like, I feel whole. Like I don't need to do anything,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't need to not do anything.
Right.
And God, it feels good.
Mm-hmm.
It feels so good. And you and I, this podcast, people we're going to bring on, the people, our friends, our community that we have, that we're building. Oh my God, it is just, it's so nourishing, man.
Yeah.
It is so nourishing. It's so exciting.
It is.
So there's my
Yeah.
2 cents on that piece.
No, I love it. I think as you were talking, like, it just reminded me of these didn't come up before, and you even said this in a way, like I think for me the worthiness and enoughness are a huge part of how I feel wholeness. Feeling worthy, claiming that I am enough, I think is a um, maybe the two most impactful experiences of living in that wholeness, and what that is. Like as you said, I don't need to do anything right now to create that enoughness, that worth, that wholeness. But I also don't need to stop doing anything to create that. Like it is, and
Yeah.
stepping into that. And I think it's so powerful as we start to examine and readjust our thoughts and our framework around our lives and around our decisions. Like this is one of many, but once you start to step into these thought patterns and stuff, it really allows so many other incredible, like, supportive thoughts, like the understanding. And this is one we've talked about a lot, and I love, like, the idea that this event is happening for me, not happening to me, is so powerful in just how we perceive uh, any event in our life, positive or negative. I think as you were talking about earlier, just having a history of having some health events, things come up that really allow you to maybe not allow, it is allow, but also encourage you to ask those questions in life, that I think often as humans we don't until we have to,
Yep.
until life is potentially not an option and you're conscious of that, and conscious of desiring it to continue, and just that space in there. There's just, it's such a fertile ground for all kinds of thoughts. Um, but once you start to perceive life as happening for you, I think, like, I don't feel like that's a thought I really could have had before, or stepped into living it before claiming and owning that wholeness or that enoughness or worthy. Because I would have been judging myself. And previous to this, I used to come up with excuses or reasons why something negative was happening to me. As if it was punishment, or somewhere something hated me. Just all these
There's an
ridiculous
enemy
things.
somewhere.
Exactly. That I have no agency over. And there's
Yeah.
just this amazing peace and comfort when you claim that agency of choosing the frame that things are happening in your life, choosing that you have options with how you respond regardless of what's happening in your external world. And this is, that wholeness piece, and claiming your wholeness is a powerful part of that.
I love everything you said, and I know we're getting longer on time, and I want to add this. I think this is a great gem that just came to me organically, is talking about wholeness and how it correlates to life purpose and vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
I would say for me, if I was forced to explain wholeness in one way, I think this would be one of my main ways to say it. Is I don't think, for me, I know. Getting that out of my vocabulary eventually. Saying I think all the time. I know for me that, okay, so it's like, wholeness is great. How have I felt that I've gotten there? Well, I feel whole when I'm present and living with my life's purpose. That may change. but indefinitely, I'm pretty clear on what that is.
Mhm.
I am clear on what that is. I think, and I'm pretty. Get that out too. So wholeness and then purpose. Okay, so I feel more whole when I'm present and living in my purpose, even if it's painful, even if I feel like crap, even if I'm uncomfortable, whatever. I'm still like locked in and whole.
Mm.
And I would have never gotten to my purpose if I wasn't vulnerable.
Mm.
And so to me, it's like if I was a hammer and I'm just like most of my life in my past, I'm like, oh, just a hammer. And, my handle's kind of broken. And it just like almost like Eeyore in, times of just like not feeling good. And I'm okay lying there as a hammer. I'm having way more fun and I'm feeling whole in a sense of like I was whole and connecting with like hammering nails. Like maybe this isn't a great example, but it's what came up is like that serving in my purpose and being vulnerable enough to discover it, find it, unlock it, and share that and embody that. I'm so much more in wholeness and at peace. So that was it.
Yeah.
I don't think I got to that climactic punchline I was hoping for. But that does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
That just hit me like a lightning bolt.
I'm really. This has been really neat. I think this is a very obviously we're talking about it because it's important in our lives
Yeah.
and a lot of people that we've worked with, and just excited to hear feedback. Excited to hear questions and thoughts on that, and how wholeness has impacted your life.
All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, we got some guests coming up from my hometown, from Sweden, from I think Denver, maybe Utah, someone else here from Orange County. We got a good list growing of some really cool
Out
people.
east,
So
yeah, we're excited.
yeah,
We'll
right on.
see
All
you
right, Joe.
soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Bye.